Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We are going to go ahead and get started. We have a wonderful event planned for tonight. We got a couple more people. The traffic is a little crazy outside, so I imagine some more people will be joining us as time goes on. My name is Erin Woolley. I'm the Interim Vice President for Institutional Advancement, and I would like to welcome Sister Carol, our President of Chestnut Hill College.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, and welcome to Chestnut Hill College's very first Women and Money event. Sounds provocative. Yeah. I'm thrilled to see so many alumni who have come back and graduates who just left us last May, and I think there might be some students among us. We're very happy to have you here this evening. I think that this is a very important topic, and it probably needs to be discussed more than we do discuss it. There's certain times in our lives when we realize we may not know enough about finances and the handling of money to take responsible care of ourselves and others. For example, when we go to college for the first time, when we graduate and go out and get that first apartment, when we get married, buy a house, when we lose a spouse, especially, I think, or a partner, and that person has taken care of all the finances, we can feel a little bit rudderless. I have to confess, I'm experiencing something like that right now. One of the sisters with whom I have lived and who has taken care of house finances for 25 years just moved to the villa. That leaves two of us in the house who don't have a clue about the complex system that the Sisters of St. Joseph use to account for every penny. So we have sought out help from a former chief financial officer at the college, Sister Elaine Cullen. She is coming in Saturday to rescue us. So I know firsthand how it feels, which I never knew before. Tonight we're fortunate to have a stellar group of speakers. Our esteemed panelists include Benny Wetschesbach, president of the Haverford Trust Company. Fine organization, I highly recommend it. We have our money there, they're terrific. Mary Ann Patton, class of 1987, and vice president of strategic growth at Mass Mutual Greater Philadelphia. And Nancy Day Kelly, class of 1971, professor at Villanova University. The event will be moderated by Catherine Moulton, class of 1992, chair of the board of directors and chief operating officer for Thomas Wynn Apartments. Before we get started, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the institutional advancement team for putting this event together. Maureen McLaughlin and Stephanie Reif, you did an excellent job with the planning and organization. Sister Mary Teresa, thank you for passing on Nancy Day Kelly's wonderful idea to have this. If you hadn't passed it on, we wouldn't be here tonight. I would also like to thank Don Vischer for setting up the technology, and Greg, who is back there running it, Jean from catering, housekeeping, and our maintenance staff, who all contributed to the success of this event, and gratitude to Erin Woolley as well for her faithful oversight of the planning of tonight's program. So without further ado, join me in welcoming our special guests as I turn the program over to our dear sister alumna, board chair, and friend, Kathy Moulton.
Thank you very much, sister. I appreciate the very warm welcome. Just for a little fun, I thought that we would start with a show of hands game, and we're all friends here, right? So there's no judgment, okay? So just raise your hands if the following statements apply to you. Do you know what it means to be in good financial health? Panelists, you don't have to answer. Do you have financial goals that you evaluate every year? Good. Do you check your online bank statements weekly to see that there are no fraudulent charges? Wow, I'm impressed, ladies. Good job. Is there a system in place to pay your bills on time? Very good, very good. Are you consistently putting money into savings for retirement? Okay, very good. Do you get a squirrely feeling in your stomach when these questions come up because you're not always sure of the answers or the vocabulary? Okay, good. I'm glad to see some real honest women in here. It's good. We're Chestnut Hill graduates after all. Well, if you raised your hand to that last question, then you're actually in the majority of the women in this country and probably even the world. These are just some of the topics that we're going to cover this evening with our wonderful panel. And we're going to have a conversation with one another and include you as our sister girlfriends to share with you some tips, but legal disclosure, no advice will be given without an attorney present or a licensed professional. So we just want to make sure that everyone is broadening our horizons and having a good time tonight and taking something home that you might be able to make use of. So Nancy, we're going to start with you because you are, after all, the woman who kicked this whole evening off.
Is this on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Nice job. You pass. So could you share with us, please, the story about how it is that you first started to get involved with your own household finances?
Well, let me begin with 3 very distinct scenarios. The first is May 15th, 1971, when I graduated from Chestnut Hill College. I was married June 5th, 1971, 3 weeks later. And shortly after that, I became a mother and a career professional. Since the time I was 22, I have worked. Since the time I was 24, I've had children. And so it quickly came upon me that we needed to sort of divide the labor in the household. Now, I came out of Chestnut Hill a very strong, independent woman. That was the time of the women's movement, and I was full of it. Trust me, if Sister Mary Xavier were here instead of Sister Carol Jean, she would not want to introduce me. True story, but it did make me feel good about myself. So we started dividing up the household tasks. So there was really no good reason that buying birthday cards and presents fell to me, and doing the weekly finances and long-range planning for money fell to John. My career was as an educational administrator. In fact, I was this woman's high school principal.
Okay, we're being really honest now.
We're among girlfriends, right?
That's right.
And so I was charged with significant institutional budgets. I wasn't afraid of them. I knew how to read them. I knew how to make sure that faculty salaries were on budget, how scholarship money was spent, and that we had enough coming in to go out. But I was not paying attention to my own personal finances. That's what Sister Jean just confessed today. All right, so it's a tale. So that's scene 1. Young, independent, working hard, children, marriage, career. Scene 2, 47 years later, at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. My husband, who has been diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and we're at the Mayo Clinic to get the 2% shot that this might not be terminal. And he is going down for his 3rd surgery in 2 days. When I saw the surgeon says, "We don't want to do this surgery, but it's the only way we're going to save his life today." So here is the actual piece of paper on which my husband, who is intubated at this time, not medicated but intubated, writes, "How bad am I?" To which the wonderful doctors and the team at the Mayo Clinic said, it's bad. Underneath it, he says, "NK, Nancy Kelly, hold my glasses." Before they take him out of the room, he scribbles a note. Get Marianne to help me make sure I'm reading this perfectly. For 10 minutes, he's writing to the nurses and doctors. I will be writing to my wife. We'll call you when we're ready. Hokey dokey? Like saying, can I have 10 minutes with my wife alone? It's serious, it's life-threatening. 47 years with a partner whom you love and adore. I go behind the hospital bed, I breathe in, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to say what could be his last words to me. I'm trying to compose myself, to give hope and faith and trust as we go into this surgery. When he finishes writing the note, trust me here, Benny, this is what he writes. Nan, all cash goes from Bryn Mawr Trust to Capital One. Credit card is due. That's when I knew I was in financial trouble. A man who's going into surgery tells me to pay the credit card bill on time. Worse than that, being a very dutiful wife, I go while he's in surgery to try and pay the credit card bill. I have the list of passwords that he had sent me. But this wonderful, dear, competent husband had coded the passwords. I did not know, after 47 years, who his favorite comic book character was. Do you know that about your spouse? Well, who knew? But there was a comic book character called Combat Kelly. That was the code to get into the Capital One account. I couldn't even get in. So, Kathy, that's when I knew I was in financial difficulty. It wasn't about the dollar balances, it was about not having any idea that credit cards were due and what were the passwords to get into them in order to pay the bill.
Thank you for sharing such a personal story with all of us. It means a lot. I think you're Combat Kelly after hearing that story. That's right. Binny, following up on Nancy's story, can you tell us a little bit about how your mother inspired you?
Yes, so my mother's name was Binny. Yes, it is our real name, and it's not short for anything. It is on our birth certificate. It's kind of like Cher, Madonna, Oprah, Binny. You just go with the first name. And my mom was very lucky. She was born to a family of means. She went to a boarding school in New England, was in the top 1% in the country in math, which brought her down to Bryn Mawr College, where she went. And she met my dad at a Penn party, and they got married right out of college, had a very traditional family. You know, she stayed home, they had 3 children, and then in the early 70s, things didn't quite work out the way my parents had planned, and they got divorced. Shortly after that, my grandfather, my mother's father, passed away, and my mother became the income beneficiary of a trust, so she was very lucky because she was financially independent. Shortly after that, she met a handsome young man who swept her off her feet, and they got married. She adopted his 2 children, who were 3 and 5 at the time, because their biological mother was killed by a drunk driver when they were 1 and 3. My wicked stepfather moved us to California, which in the 70s was one of the few states that had something called community property. So after a year of residency, he sued my mother for alimony divorce, moved to Hawaii, and left my mother with the 3 of us, plus the 2, 5 children, age 40, twice divorced, not the picture she had painted. But she was super lucky because she was financially independent. So she could do what was important to her, which was to stay home and raise children. So flash forward 15 years later, and it's 1993. And at this point, my older brother's married, and he's working. I'm married. I'm now at the Haverford Trust Company. My younger sister was going back to school. My one brother JB was going to Jefferson Medical School. My other brother, Jeff, the youngest, was now going to USC after serving honorably in the first Persian Gulf War. So I'd say my mom was super successful in what was important to her. So I was really surprised when I got a call on a Friday afternoon in '93, and the call went like this. I'm like, "Hey, Mom, how you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I'm not well. I think I need to get a job." I'm like, "What?" Yeah, I know. I'm 56 years old and I haven't worked in over 30 years and I have no idea how to put together a resume. I don't even know what I'm qualified for. Can you help me? And I'm like, "Well, yeah, of course I can help you, but wait a second, hold on. I thought, what happened to the trust that you were this income beneficiary of?" "Oh, yeah. Well, the income from that has dropped over, by 50% in the last 10 years. And I don't understand, and the way it's going, I don't know if it's going to keep happening, but I don't live a lavish lifestyle, and California is very expensive and very heavy in taxes, and I do not know what to do, and I need to get a job. Can you help me or not?" And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. I said, "But Mom, first let's just dive into what's happened with this trust. What did the trust officer say as to why the trust had, the income had dropped in half?" "Oh, I've never spoken to them." I'm like, "What? You've been the income beneficiary of a trust for 17 years and you've never spoken to them?" "Nope." I said, "Oh, that person would have been fired from Haverford Trust if that had been them." "Okay, all right, Mom, I do this all day. Tell me, what do your statements say? What are you invested in?" "Mom, you must be getting copies of statements." "Oh, yes, I get them every month." "Well, what's the matter?" "I don't know how to read them." It's the top 1% in the country in math. My mother was not dumb. She was just told, "Somebody else will take care of that for you, dear." So that's why I'm here, because I'm very passionate about bringing women into the conversation as it relates to investments and finances, because my experience has been that women often aren't. You're not unique. And it's a real problem because 80% of women are going to be the head of a household at some point in time, whether they want to or not. And yet, when McKinsey did a study, they found that 90% of women feel financially illiterate. They don't know what questions to ask or who to go to. And that's a problem, and it has to end.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and for helping to flip the script. And you also provided the perfect segue for Marianne. So Marianne, can you share with us, please, why it is that you started the MassMutual Women's Advisory Board?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. I'm honored to be sitting with Nancy and Benny and you, Kathy, and Sister Carol. It's so great to see you. I didn't start, actually, the MassMutual Women's Advisory Board, but I was actually asked to be a member. And I think it all started here, Sister Carol, my passion for helping women, all of us. I do a lot of events like this, with the idea being to do exactly what Benny and Nancy are saying, is to help all of us to have this conversation about our finances. What we know in the industry, and I think Benny will echo this, is that 17% of our industry is made up of women. So when I graduated from Chestnut Hill, I entered into an extremely male-dominated field, as really we all have up here at the table. And I noticed very quickly that that room, whether it's the boardroom, the meeting room, the conference room, was uncomfortable. And that stayed with me the almost 30 years now of being part of the financial industry. I also saw over my time that, as we shared earlier, that women were highlighted in ads. We were highlighted as mothers. We even were highlighted sometimes as successful businesswomen. But we were in advertisements, and that's where I saw it beginning and where it ending. And we weren't in all of those meetings, and we weren't in all of the big conversations that either led organizations or were we spoken to directly. So with that, I thought at Mass Mutual what was absolutely incredible was that we talked about more of a grassroots movement where we as women who work in the industry, we now have the capacity to actually change the industry and the face of the industry. And because of my years of being in an area that's focused on strategic growth and growing the firm through talent, I thought this was a great time to raise my hand and to feel as though that I could actually leave a legacy and make a difference. And one, that is to be able to have these conversations with you on a more intimate level. And then two, to be able to talk to women and express to them the need for them to entertain this as an actual idea for a career and for a future. So in our firm, there are only 1,500 women who actually face front with clients. But yet we have probably 5,000 men that are in the same exact role. We know that creating an environment that's inclusive for all of us and entertaining these conversations is really important. We do this naturally as women. So having Binny and Nancy here sharing their stories is something that I think we do naturally as women. And I think having the ability to share these stories and to engage with other women allows us now to kind of all ties rise and allows us to share and hopefully have the opportunity for you to engage in conversations going forward after tonight. So it was really because of this idea about having a grassroots movement right here, whether it's on a college campus with university women or with clients.
Thank you. I know the sisters are all really proud of you for following in that tradition of creating systemic change. Thank you. So Nancy, when we were talking before this discussion, you were telling me how sometimes you were sitting in on those financial meetings with John, but you were listening with half an ear. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Well, I'm feeling a little bit better about myself after Binny's story about her mother, who didn't have the meetings. But I had gone to meetings with a financial planner and, began to start the retirement process and all that. And I think all of us in this room are busy, busy, busy women with multiple roles that we play. And we face finite time in the day, and we face finite energy. So one of the things I learned very on as a career professional and mother was how I apportion my energy. So where did I have to pay full attention? Where could I sort of listen and pick up the big picture? And where could I zone out? And so when I went to those financial meetings, because it was not my primary household responsibility, it was John's, I was faking a lot of listening. I always made sure I asked a couple of questions that let everybody in the room know I was there and that I mattered. To Mary Ann's point, I didn't want them just taking me for granted, but I wasn't paying full attention. If that had been a meeting at the school I worked, it would be full attention, but not at that meeting. And so when I met with, unfortunately, our financial planner also died of a terrible cancer 3 months before John. So when I met with a new financial planner and he asked me basic questions to which I did not know the answer, what is your household income? What are your monthly expenses? I was so mortified that this person across the table from me didn't know. Well, listen, I've run schools and I can do. He was looking at me like, you don't know that answer? So that's why I got into that trap. Not paying attention.
Yeah, but at least you were at the meetings.
Right.
And the one thing I want to say is that if you're not invited to the meeting, insist that you're invited. And I cannot tell you how many times either a spouse or a partner says, oh, they don't want to go. They don't want to attend. They're too busy. They have other things that they want to do. I take care of it. And I push really hard to say, no, 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 no. You need to invite them. An extreme story about this was there's an attorney in Cincinnati that I've been working with for 25 years. And I manage his 401k plan. And he unfortunately had open heart surgery a couple years ago, and he was fine, everything else. And I had said to him after that, I said, listen, how come your wife doesn't come? She should be coming. He said, oh, Benny, don't worry. She knows to call you. I said, well, how does she know to call me? Well, your name's on the refrigerator. You're on the list of the important people if something happens to me. I said, that's terrific. I am glad I'm on the list. But do you think that if something happens to you, that that's a really good time for me to get to know her for the first time? Do you really think? Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I said, no, it's really not fine. And again, I knew him really well, so I could push a little bit further. I said, look, I'm coming back to Cincinnati in 2 months. Why don't we get together and have lunch with her? No, she doesn't want, she's too busy. I said, you call her right now. And so he called her, and he had her on speakerphone, but he didn't say that I was in the room. And he's like, oh, hey, honey, how you doing? You know, I was meeting with Benny today, and she said she's coming back in 2 months, and she'd love to get together. He didn't even finish the sentence to say, oh, we wanted to have lunch. She immediately says, I would love to be with her. And he looked at me, and he's like, she's in the room right now. So you absolutely have the right to be there. So if you're not invited, invite yourself. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. You can keep the microphone, Benny, actually. But before I ask you your next question, you reminded me that over the summer I met a new friend at a brunch at the Foundation for Islamic Education. And she said to me, if you are not invited to have a seat at the table, then you know who's on the menu. And I thought those are real words to live by. So make sure that you invite yourself to be at the table, because you don't want to end up on the menu.
Right, but sometimes, to your point also, Nancy, it's not women of a certain generation. I have a 23-year-old daughter who's really intelligent. She went to Georgetown University. She's at Penn Medical School. She is a bright young lady. I raised her, and I said to her, Larissa, let's have a conversation about investments, finances. Oh, Mom, you'll take care of that for me. And I'm like, no. You know? So it's not always not being invited. You need to attend as well.
Thank you. So what do we need to know about our household finances once we get to the table?
Some of the basics. Yeah. So there's 2 ways of looking at them. One is from a profit and loss. So how much income, does the household, and what are the sources of it? What are your expenses? And it really doesn't get too much more technical than that. And you can always know at the end of the day, at the end of the year, whether you're running a profit or loss in that, did you save any money? Or did you have to borrow money? Which comes to the other side of the equation, which is your balance sheet. So there's one that's called an income statement. The other thing is a balance sheet. A balance sheet is what do you own versus what do you owe. So you need to know, what your 401k, how is that invested? That's a big asset for most of us. And if you're not participating in a 401k or a 403b, which are retirement assets, you need to do so starting immediately, because that's the best thing you can do about the future. But really understanding some of those basics is a good place to start.
Thank you so much. Marianne, should couples have a financial meeting with each other? How often should they do that? And is there a time of year that's best?
Yes, you should have a financial meeting. We actually believe that this is a gender-driven difference, that as women, now more than ever, we're contributing sometimes 50% or even the breadwinner in our household. So there are differences. There's gender-driven differences in how we want to spend money, how we want to save money, and even where we choose to do philanthropy. So we feel as though before you actually meet with a financial advisor, that you actually have these conversations with each other, whoever that significant person is in your life, because, as you know, when you see an attorney, there's a billable hour there. So we say, there's another way to control your expenses. Air that laundry and those conversations. And they're really courageous conversations that sometimes can be very difficult and uncomfortable. And there's certainly ways in which you can address those conversations. But as we all know, being, either married or having significant people in our lives, that, that's not always easy. But it is really important. And I would also say that it's important to have these conversations prior to seeing someone who's going to give you advice so that you land on the same page. And we also say that this should be done at least annually, if not biannually.
Thank you so much. Nancy, how is it that you felt like you were starting to gain confidence with your family finances?
Well, Kathy, and thank you for giving us these questions ahead of time, because this question really stumped me more than the others you gave me. Because the question was, where did I gain confidence? And I thought about that a long time, and I really thought, where did that come from? The ability that I knew that I could manage this, that I could take this leadership role in my personal finances. And I have to honestly say, and this is not a paid announcement for Chestnut Hill College, it really comes back to Sister Consuela Marie in my freshman year, a brilliant, brilliant woman who taught me how to look at facts and interpret them. She was quickly followed by an equally brilliant and even more intimidating man, Dr. John Lucas, and followed up by the most intimidating person I met at Chestnut Hill College, Sister St. Pierre. But the confidence came from read it, it's hard, it's challenging, get the facts, and then make your own interpretation. And that's what I've applied to my financial life, is that on my right and my left are very skilled professional women in the banking and trust field. But I sit here tonight and say, you know what? Give me a couple months and I will know as much as they do. And that comes from those people who taught me here, that it's your head and your determination to work on what the task is ahead of you. Not, Benny's mother was in the 1% of math people. I am not in the 1% of math people. But I left Chestnut Hill believing, give me the task, no matter how difficult it is, and I can handle it. And that's where I got the confidence. Then I began reading all the portfolios that came to me, going through all the files that we had, and really going back in history and looking at things, subscribing to The Economist. I mean, really, I just threw myself into it. I thought, I have to master this, and I'm not going to be dependent on other people, even my financial advisor, to make these decisions. I'm going to be informed. And that comes back to the education I got at Chestnut Hill.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for reminding us we have it in us.
Unasked by anybody.
I always say, I think there's a great, when you fly, and we get on the plane and there's the whole thing where the mask comes down, and I oftentimes, with my boys were little, I'd have one on either side of me, and I think, oh my gosh, I need to remember this. When the mask comes down, I got to put it on myself first. I'll be holding their hands and I'll be breathing, and then I'll be able to help either one of them. I think it's great that we go with this mental picture that put your own mask on, and this is a mask that you need to kind of breathe from regularly, that allows you to look at your own personal finances. Take the breath, take the time, breathe, and then you'll be good for everybody else around you.
Very nice.
And one thing I want to emphasize, because when we're sitting here, we're women of a certain age, and so you're thinking, some of you are thinking, I don't need a financial planner. I just got to pay the bills and get through the month. This is when one really does need to start. Even if the conversation on a monthly basis is with yourself, but there should be somebody who is in the field of my left and right partner helping you look. And don't think that you need a ton of money in order to talk to these people.
You ladies are just beautiful. Thank you. Benny, as a financial planner, what are the circumstances under which you normally meet women in your industry?
people that I work with, clients, it's really a whole variety. It can be at a life event, you know, divorce, widow, marriage, but also the next generation. You know, and that's one thing I actually feel quite honored to work with multiple generations within families. But really, I echo what you had to say, Nancy, and that anybody who is out on their own should be participating in the conversation, and particularly when you're first starting out, to start saving, because time is your asset and it's on your side.
Thank you. Marianne, I'm going to come back to you. Could you please share with us why we need more women in the financial world?
Yes, and this is why I'm on this, our Women's Advisory Board. So I will rattle a few numbers off to you. 9 out of 10 women will be sole financial decision maker in their lifetime. Women hold 51% of personal wealth in the U.S. 55% of women ages 25 to 34 prefer working with Binny. Private wealth is expected to grow from 14 trillion to 22 trillion by 2030, but yet 40% of household women are the primary breadwinners, and this has increased since 1960, with 2/3 of private wealth by 2030 being controlled by women. 17% of our industry, though, is made up of women, and take that a step further, 11% in leadership roles are held by women. We also know that when there are not so great circumstances like the one that you spoke of, I'm surprised that Nancy didn't go the next step and say, but I really prefer to talk to a woman who actually knows what I'm going through and how I feel, because statistically, we also know that that is taking place, that we like to be with each other, we understand each other, and with that, to me, then presents opportunity. So my passion and my legacy lies in getting this message out to not only those of us that are in our demographic, but also young women and women re-entering workforce, that there's opportunity in the great big financial world, whether it's the Haverford Trust or organizations such as mine, that there's opportunity for women to now make an impact and to leave a legacy and to make a mark. And I want women to consider this.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you are.
Thank you.
So Nancy, when you and I were talking earlier this week, you talked a lot about maintaining your independence after you lost John. And can you share with us why that was so important to you?
I was very privileged to teach abroad in Copenhagen, Denmark for 5 fall semesters. One of the courses that I taught there was called Psychology of Endings. Now, before you think that it was a course to juniors and seniors who had come abroad to study from hundreds of universities across the United States, not just from Villanova where I work. Before you think that we spent a whole semester talking about the end of life, 90% of the course is about all the little endings we have in our life, like end of childhood, end of your first real strong friendship, when you left home, many things, end of a romantic relationship. But in the last 2 weeks of the course, I taught on the end of life. And one of the things that I taught, it was a psychology course, is that one of the things that many of us do and make a grave mistake about is that we rely on our emotional support team for everything we need. And our emotional support team, again, has limited time and limited energy. So if I was using my 2 sons in this case, one who's 46 and one who's 39, to help me with my finances, that I would be moving emotional energy that I wanted for them in their support of me as a person to an area that someone else could help me with, and that I could be independent. I wouldn't have to rely on them for. And so I knew that that was the psychological principle that many people misunderstand. Who are the people closest to me? Bring them in. And at that point, I knew that my independence now was the key goal, and to save those people who loved me and were willing. I have brothers. So many people said, let me help you with this. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I want the independence of this myself to make these decisions, and I want your emotional and physical energy supporting me other places where I can't hire someone to give that to me.
Thank you so much. I'm going to skip the next question because I want to get to a really important story. Binny, you shared with me something very personal about something that every one of us should be planning for in our personal lives. Can you share with us that story and what we should do?
Yes, and it actually dovetails a bit to what you just spoke of, on things that we can control versus things we cannot control. And one of them is within the realm of estate planning. Now, a lot of people hear about estate planning and they think, oh, I don't have any money. Like, I don't need to do estate planning. Well, estate planning is more than just about money. It also includes things such as a financial as well as medical power of attorney and living wills. So what's a medical power of attorney? Well, anybody over the age of 18 is independent. So if you do not have a medical power of attorney for somebody who's over 18, you cannot get information about them if they get hit by a car, as my son was. So my son and daughter, because I'm the evil, wicked mother, I made them get medical and financial power of attorneys the day after their 18th birthday. So my son was out in Cincinnati. He had just graduated from Xavier University. He was working in corporate headquarters for Macy's. He was doing exactly as he should be at the age of 21 on a Saturday night, going out with his friends. They took an Uber. They were being responsible, not drinking and driving, but he certainly, had a few drinks. And they were getting out of the car, and his cell phone dropped in the back seat of the car. So his friends got out. They ran across the street. David, reached down, got his cell phone. He saw his friends, and he didn't look, and he started to run across the street. And somebody who was texting and driving too fast ran David, hit him with a car. And my son is 6'5", thank God, because the car that hit him was very low. So he went over the car as opposed to being run over. So I'm, in bed at 11:48. My cell phone rings because I'm a mom and I keep my cell phone on next to me at night. And I answer, I'm like, David. He's like, yo, Mom, I'm in the back of an ambulance. I've just been hit by a car. I think I'm gonna be okay. Okay, gotta go. Click. Oh my God. Oh my God. The first flight to Cincinnati from Philadelphia on a Sunday is at 11 o'clock in the morning. Cell phones pretty much don't work in a lot of hospitals, particularly University of Cincinnati, which is a level 4 trauma center where he was taken to. And I was fortunate that I was able to get a hold of people, but I was also very lucky that I did have that medical power of attorney, because the doctors would not be able to talk to me and tell me how my son was had I not had that. And this is a topic also that I'm really passionate about, because it's within the realm of things that we can control. And at Haverford Trust, we do something called Speaker Series for Women, which we've been doing since 2011. And we bring women in for these different conversations to engage them in different ways, in a non-sales, non-threatening format. And one of my favorite programs is something we call Ages, Stages, and Essential Pages, which is what are the different stages in life where you should consult with a trust and estate attorney to get things like a medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, as well as writing a will. And it's all through the different stages in our lives. So when you turn 18, you should have that. When you start working, you start filling out those 401k beneficiary plans. Well, they change over time. So when you get married, you probably want to look at that. You have a child, you probably want to look at it. You get divorced, you better look at it. Somebody dies, there's a whole lot of different things. And so we had done one of these. We had 120 women at lunch, and I went around to the different ladies in my office. We had 15 who participated, and I said to them, hey, how are the conversations with the people at lunch that you had? Were they engaged? Did they learn something at the conversation that this attorney had? And almost all of them said, yes, and I have so much to do. And these were women in my office. So there's a lot that a lot of us can do and benefit from this. And one of the women in my office had shared a story with me. She said, remember my 23-year-old daughter who was who ended up in the hospital? And it was the same thing. And she went storming out of the office because her daughter was taken to a local hospital. And she was standing in the hospital crying, and the doctors would not speak to her. And how did she feel? Really awful. I have a client who's, sorry I'm going on, but this is also important too. Those of you who know somebody whose parents are divorced, who's making decisions on your behalf? Is it your mom or is it your dad? You need to make that decision, and don't say they're going to share it, because you're putting them into a really bad position. And these are things that you need to think about. And people say, oh, but I'm young. Bad things aren't going to happen. Well, have you heard of Terry Schiavo? Or Karen Ann Quinlan from our day? They did not have advanced directives. People were trying to understand, did they want a plug pulled or not? And then there became a big fight between should the plug be pulled or not, and who was making that decision. And these, again, are the things that we can control, and estate planning is a gift to the people who are left behind. Sorry, I went long.
No, that was all important information, and I thank you. So for those of you who are making your to-do list, right after your partner's favorite comic book character and color, you should also go home and write up a medical power of attorney so that your business is taken care of if something awful should happen. Thank you. So Marianne, sticking with younger women for a moment, but we're going to make it a little happier. Young women are going out into the workforce now, and they're getting their first employment package. What should they be looking for in their benefits?
Yep, that's a good one. I will tell you that my advice is when you land that first job or you change, as oftentimes women we do, and hopefully it's for better opportunities, that it is critical that you understand that benefits package. Hopefully your employer has made a wonderful decision to help you plan for your retirement, but I really urge you to make sure that you do not skimp on your insurance portfolio. So you first would look at your health insurance and understand that, understand the cost, understand the what ifs, right? We hear a lot about that there can be these health what ifs in these scenarios. And if that what if does happen, what would that look like, right? So maybe it's a little bit more today that you're investing in your benefits that's coming out of your compensation, but don't skimp on that. I think exposing yourself to any type of risk is not smart. I also would encourage you, a big area that we really don't talk about is disability. And that we're more likely, as we all know, I'm sure we all know someone who has experienced, sadly, breast cancer or one of the other cancers, and they're fairly young and they're a mom, or perhaps a spouse has become ill, but you really need to make sure that you check the box for your disability coverage and your benefits. I am personally very passionate about that. I think we all have our passions. My passion is very much tied to the fact that we don't understand this aspect of our portfolio and our benefits, and a big one is disability. Understanding that disability coming through your group benefits is actually a taxable entity. So when you think about the fact that you say, oh, if something happened to me and I fell off a ladder and I can't go to work, I'll still make 60% of my income. Well, 60% of your income less taxable income. So think about that. So think if you're managing your household and all of a sudden, because of some unforeseen circumstance, you lose 50% of your income. So there's a gap there. So I just would like to just kind of plant that seed in your head that you need to always take a look at that. And that then would then maybe have you look differently about your investments or what you're saving for going forward. And I encourage you to make sure, as Benny also said, to always look to see what your employer is doing on your behalf for your retirement. As Benny said, that the best thing that we have going for us, especially when we're young, is we have time. And as we all know, interest compounds. So whatever dollar you're saving today, and if somebody's contributing to that dollar, it's going to grow. And pay yourself today. Never put off thinking that you are too young. Take advantage today.
Very good. Thank you for that practical advice. Sort of staying in this young woman theme, Nancy, if you had the opportunity to give your 21-year-old self some advice before you got married or just after you got married, what would you tell yourself?
I think I would repeat much of what Benny and Marianne already said, which is to make yourself knowledgeable, competent, self-assured, that this is your area of ownership, that it's not designated to your mother, in that case from Benny's daughter, or to your partner, but that we all owe it to ourselves to have this competency within us. I think the other thing I would say to myself is start reading the fine print in all the things that we sign and do and get from our employer. Just yesterday I came home after a really long day and I was tired and I walked the dog and I opened this. And it's a letter from my employer, Villanova, and it's about John's pension. Ordinarily I would have just gone, I pored over it last night. Even though it says no change is being made, I'm like, they don't send me 4 pages of information if no change is being made. Something is in the pipeline. I need to know it now. That's part of my income stream. So I think the difference between what I got last night and what I would have done with this when I was 21 is what I would tell you. Begin to inform yourself. Read about our economy, know what's going on with trade wars. Don't think that that's something that you just hear on the news. These are affecting, as I said to my students today, the Dow dropped 400 points. It goes up again, hopefully, but these are things I wasn't paying attention to when I was 21. I was thinking it's all going to work out. Somebody else is going to take care of it. And what Benny mentioned with her son and Marianne, when a medical crisis hits, it hits unexpectedly, it hits fast many times, and your financial resources have to be at the ready to handle that. And you have to know how to do that. When John was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, we both quit our jobs for a year, picked up and went to Rochester, Minnesota, rented an apartment, had to eat and live there while our house was empty. All of these financial expenses, and I was clueless as to how we were paying for them. A man who was terminally ill and going into surgery repeatedly was in charge of that. 21-year-old me would not let that happen.
Good girl.
Can I add one thing? So often people change jobs, particularly when you're younger. And when you leave your job, your employer will say the 401k plan, you need to roll it over into an IRA. And often a mistake that I will see people make is say, oh, that's $10,000. I'm 30 years old. I could use that money for a down payment on a house or something else. So it's nothing. I'm just going to take it out and I'm going to spend it. Do not do that. The difference between taking that $10,000 IRA at age 30 and spending it versus keeping it for another 35 years until you're 65 and say you don't add anything to it, you just invest it in the straight stock market, the difference is having $100,000 when you're 65 versus actually only $6,000 when you're 30, because by the time that you take it out and pay taxes and penalty on it, you've just dropped it. So you're talking about almost $100,000 swing. So don't do it. And don't take money out of your 401k for emergencies, like doing a ski trip, like one of my friends did, wanted to go skiing with us, and she said, oh, I can take it out of my 401k, which, that's not a real emergency.
Thanks for reminding us what real emergencies are all about. Benny, I'm going to ask you one last question before we turn it over to our audience, and I have one last question for the two of you as well. Benny, how has your perspective as a woman made you successful in your career?
Well, I would say that, well, first of all, I've never really thought of myself as a female in the industry. I mean, that was one thing about a Baldwin School education, was that it was drilled into me. I went to a private girls' school for 13 years. And it was drilled into you that you can succeed in anything if you worked hard enough and you deserved it, you can do it. So there's a real benefit to a women's education, which I strongly believe in. So I never viewed myself as, a woman in the room. I just viewed myself as somebody who could get the job done. And that's how I always behaved.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. So Nancy and Marianne, when we were talking to prepare for tonight, so many times in our conversation, you kept turning the conversation back to your experience at Chestnut Hill. It came up again and again. So could you please tell us what it is about Chestnut Hill College that still is so special to you after only a couple of years past graduation?
I meant Nancy.
I'll go first. My experience with Chestnut Hill College, I'm going to connect with what Benny said, that I had a very strong, feisty, independent mother. I have 3 older brothers, and my mother raised us as if we were all her children, not my soft daughter and my sons, I just grew up in that household. And again, it was thinking about this panel that it struck me that my mother graduated from Chestnut Hill in 1931. And my mother-in-law was her classmate, who was also a strong, feisty woman. I think that's why John identified and loved me. It was like, oh, she's just like my mother. But so I can really say that Chestnut Hill has given not just me, but the women in my family, this sense of your own personal strength, and I can do, and I can take charge, and I can be the person that needs to do whatever it is I'm asked to do. And so it is with enormous gratitude that I come back to Chestnut Hill. And again, Sister Mary Xavier would be the most shocked person that I was here, because in particular the last 2 years that I was at Chestnut Hill, I've raised enormous hell for the Sisters of St. Joseph. And it's on the record in the yearbook. There is
Your file.
The yearbook is so bad, truth, right? It wasn't allowed in the library because it had such severe criticism of the college and the Sisters of St. Joseph in it. So I am here humbly with gratitude for the education I received, even though it was contentious.
I think whether it's Baldwin or Chestnut Hill, with what Nancy is saying, I think, we've had the benefit of having great leaders, Sister Carol, Sister Catherine Miller, Sister Matthew Anita. We all, as women, were here, and we saw that our professors, the majority were women, were our sisters. Our coaches, our class presidents, Cheryl, were women. So when you left here and when you leave here, if you're about to leave or if you're already out like we are, to Benny's point, I didn't really see gender either when I landed at places that were full of just of men. To everyone's credit here, was about doing the hard work and doing the heavy lifting and doing the performance that was needed to get the job done. Now, they might have seen things differently of me, but I think because we saw women here in leadership roles, it told us that there was a very much a can-do, and we had opportunity for leadership.
Very nice, thank you. What a nice way to conclude our panel. Not entirely, you still have more questions coming from the audience. So does anyone have a question that they would like to ask our panelists? I see one over here. Vinny, do you want to field that?
Did y'all hear me? Ask again. What's the difference between the 401k and the 403b?
Same thing. They're just 401k and 403b are just IRS part of the tax code, and a 401k is a retirement plan for profits, and a 403b is a retirement plan for nonprofits. So it's the same exact thing.
Who do you work for? Jefferson. Jefferson Hospital? Jefferson. Okay, so you have a 403b? Yes. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Yes.
Could you describe the difference between an IRA and an IRA Roth in terms of the taxes?
Again, an IRA is put in with, a Roth IRA is post-tax dollars, and it's a difference in the taxes in terms of when do you pay them and how they accrue within that.
Thank you. See, Meg? Bless your heart, Michelle.
Thanks. So we are recent graduates of Chestnut Hill, and one of the things that you mentioned is to learn and to kind of be sponges for all this information. Do you have any resources that you would recommend for us to look for this kind of information and to learn as much as possible while we're at this age?
Do you read the business section of the newspaper?
No.
I would.
Have you seen a newspaper recently?
Maybe.
Well,
What's a newspaper? I'm kidding.
All your major newspapers are online now, and many of us read them only online. But you should start reading. Is the first thing that I would say that you should do.
Okay.
That this is information not privy just to my colleagues who work in the financial world, that we can gain a financial competency ourselves. And I'm an avid reader of the New York Times. I only started reading the business section a year ago when my husband died. Up until that point, that was his section of the newspaper. I read the sports section, but not the business section.
Can I answer? Yep. So I think there's some creative things you can do, right? So definitely on the internet. But yesterday, so Tina is here with me from my office. Yesterday, we spent the entire day at the PA Conference on Women, and Binny was there. So get aware of things that are going on in your city or your town that is geared towards women. I think great that you came here tonight. This is awesome. You know, I can't say that anybody ever really took the time when I was younger to give me strong financial advice on the basics. Maybe create with your friends a group that meets monthly. You know, everyone has a book club. Maybe have a money club where it's just you and your girlfriends or your classmates, where you meet and assign everybody a topic and have fun with it. And that'll allow you to share ideas, best practices that you learn from each other. And for women who are more mature, or same thing, have fun with it. Don't be afraid of it.
Very creative, thank you.
I love that idea of a club, and maybe we could make an alumni list of people who work in the financial area who would come just once and spend an hour with your group of women of all ages. Just to have a professional with you for that conversation.
But there's lots of things going on now for women. Lots of events, lots of networks, things you can join even online for research. Get involved, kind of poke around.
What Marianne is saying is absolutely true, and she has all the stats here. The adage, I forget what movie it's from, follow the money. Yes. The money is going to be female as we move forward. Right. So the industry is paying attention, and I live where we have mainline night school. I'm sure there's a local night school around here where you pay $65 and you go to 6 sessions. Yes. They're really targeting financial competency among women of all ages. Find one.
Beautiful. Thank you. I know we have a question in the back.
Hi, my name is Minette Taylor. I just recently started looking at my finance because I'll be 50 next year.
Happy birthday.
So, thank you. So the first thing I did, I was watching Susan Corman's show, and I bought her a golden case, as they called it. I just got it yesterday. So I figured I'd start there first because my 401k didn't look as rich as I thought it should have looked. So the will that you was talking about, I don't think that's in the kit. The hospital will, or so I wanted to know what was that name again, so I could actually Google a document.
Yeah. So there are two components to it. There's a medical power of attorney, which is where you give somebody else permission to hear about your health. So if I gave Nancy my medical power of attorney, she could ask the doctors about me, and they would be able to tell her about me. So that's the first thing. The second one is called either living will or advanced directive, and that's where you say, I do not want to be resuscitated. I want somebody to pull the plug. Do not feed and water me if I'm extremely, sick. Those type of things. So there's two components to that should be attended to. And on your 401k plans, by the way, that you're all participating in, make sure you look at the investment selections, investment options, to make sure that they're right for you.
Do you want to talk about a durable power of attorney too? You also need a durable power of attorney. In the case with John, if he was unable to sign some materials and checks, fortunately I had the durable power of attorney, but that was the first question I was asked. Do you have the legal right to this? So here you're a spouse for 47 years, and they'll still ask you, do you have a durable power of attorney? And you need to have that to say yes.
I want to add one element to this discussion. I hope everyone lives happily ever after with their partners. But one night, ex-Charming walked out in the middle of the night, and it was great, but I started making lists because I'm a Chestnut Hill graduate, and I had my list of the things that I had to do that day, that week, and that month. And one of the first things that it was in the week plan, was make sure that my durable medical power of attorney and beneficiaries were changed immediately, because God forbid, if anything happened to me, I did not want that man, father of my children, love him forever, but I didn't want him to make those important decisions. So just bear that in mind. Thank you. I know we have another question.
Do you want to talk while I'm here? I just had a couple of comments. One is that I am going to find the yearbook from 1971 to check out what is in there. And no, I just wanted to tell you, I think this is excellent. It's very informative, and I'm so glad that we're here. Marianne and I were whispering, we did not even know that there was a medical power of attorney that we should be getting for our children who will be over the age of 18 in December. So very informative. Benny, my daughter, is a freshman at Xavier. And I'm thinking now, after listening to all of you but Nancy, whenever the financial planner contacts us, I don't want to attend and I zone out. But I'm thinking maybe if I had a female financial planner, which is the way that I've gone with my doctors, I think that maybe I would be more in tune and more interested. So you are shedding new light on all of this, and and I thank you very much.
Great points. Thank you.
How you doing? I wanted to ask, you said that we should make a balance sheet for our personal finances as well? Is that what, I wanted to clarify that we should have a balance sheet, and we should do that at the end of the year, or should that be monthly or bi-yearly, or?
The question was, should we have our own personal balance sheet? And I would say that that's something that you should know. Do you write it all down, once a year or once a month? I would not do it once a month. I would do it, as your situation changes, but you should have a starting place. You should know what you own and what you owe, and that's really important.
Are you confusing this with a budget? Is it a difference? There's a difference between a budget and a balance sheet.
I know that.
Okay.
Yeah. I was asking I wanted to clarify, because in business you have to keep your balance sheets, things like that. But I never thought to do it from an actual personal finance.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would add, as a person in a significant life transition, I do it every 3 months. And I will gradually decrease that, but if you're in a transition, you're in the headlights with it.
I'd like to know what advice you have for saving up for significant but not always long-term projects, maybe a new car, vacation, renovation project, beyond,
I think that, one of the things is if you have a regular paycheck, to have a portion of it put automatically into a savings account so it doesn't go right into your checking account. Because if you don't see it, you don't spend it. And make it hard to get to it. So you don't change your mind at the store and say, I'll just transfer it from my savings to checking and they'll cover for that. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. And you have to start getting in the habit of doing that. And then when you have an opportunity, if you have more of a windfall, say you get a bonus or you get a tax refund check, those are great opportunities to, again, put that to the side for house, wedding, vacation, car.
Excellent. Thank you. Oh, good. We have more questions. Michelle's getting all of her steps in right now.
When looking at a financial planner, what kind of things would you look in selecting a financial planner? Because I went to see one and I wanted to know what is the acceptable rate or percentage of what you invest that they should be getting according to the industry, and what kind of industry standards you have in terms of being part of an association or something like that.
One of the first questions you want to ask is, what's your fee? What are you making on my money? It's nice to think they're doing it for goodwill, but they're not. So the second, I would say, and I'll turn it over to the professionals, Kathy mentioned, like our doctors, I think a lot of it's rapport. So interview a couple of people. When our financial planner died, when I called, and I said, I need to speak to Neil. And they were like, and I said, well, what's up? And they said, well, Neil died. I was like, you've got to be out of your mind. Neil's dead? Who do I talk to? So I then interviewed different financial planners. This is going to be my planner. So it's rapport.
Rapport is a lot of it. And asking people that you respect who they use is a good place to start as well.
Great answers, thank you. Do we have one more?
Yeah. Here's my papers. If you have a spouse who typically is the individual that's in charge of the finances for the household, and you want to approach the subject of, let me have a seat at the table, and you get pushback, or the response is, don't worry, you're listed for the insurance purposes, how do you handle that? Like, what sort of lingo can you use or advice? Or I know you had like all the percentages and stuff like that. Is there like a great way to approach that so that you don't get turned down?
I wouldn't say let me. I would pull the chair up, number one. That would never happen.
I love you, Mary.
Sorry about that.
No, it's perfect.
But truly.
We said real girlfriend talk, right?
Right, real girlfriend talk. You have a seat at the table, number one. And I think, we can all probably add our flavor to this, but you're contributing, right? So you have a voice. I'm sorry? All the more the reason. So I think, know that you have a voice and that your voice matters. And then you can talk about life expectancy and over time, what your contribution is to the household and what would life be like without your contribution, because that would directly impact what's going on in your household for everyone. So, I think that goes back to probably our confidence. Having the confidence to know that you can have the voice. And it's not a negative, it's a positive. All of this is positive. This is all to empower you to have the voice to pull up your chair to the table.
Great answer, thank you. And Nancy had the confidence to start pulling the microphone away. So go.
Oh, no, I was really going to pass it. But I think what I would say how to approach it, and I totally agree with Marianne, you are the partner in this relationship, so I do think partner means I'm equal in there with you, but I would be careful with the dignity of the person with whom you're negotiating this with, and there is in our world, except at this table here, a real belief that this is a man's job. A man's the provider, a man takes care of this, so I would be in the back of my mind very conscious that I'm touching on an area of independence and dignity in my partner. So I would do it with a delicate but clear, I'm taking my time, but I know where I'm going to end up.
I think another great exercise that I would say is understand between you and your husband, talk more about what your why is. What is your vision? Ask those questions. What is your plan for us going forward? What's your plan for the family? What do you see? Ask the why questions. And I think when we ask why questions, it's very open and it creates opportunity for dialogue, which allows you to have that conversation and maybe to see where you're really more similar than you think, and maybe also where there's a little bit of differences. But when you pull out and talk about having a vision together, I think that'll help with sitting at that table.
I just feel like I'm sorry, Nancy, you said that you didn't really know until your husband was there.
He's going into surgery and he's telling me pay the credit card bill.
Right, and it's just important that we as women understand how to get to that.
And he was, 74 when that happened, but it could have been the cancer that he had could happen to a 30-year-old.
My husband was 46 and had a massive brain bleed. And I sat on the floor of Jefferson's Trauma Center with 2 very small children at home. So, I hear stories and, I think we all could probably hear stories. But I signed lots of papers that night, lots and lots, and literally never even read them. But I signed them. And that was probably the pivotal moment for me. I think we all have had pivotal moments, but I was 40, just 40, when I had that moment, Sister Carol. And he was an attorney, smart guy, and literally was having a massive brain bleed. So again, don't, do as I say, don't do as I do, do as I say.
Did you have anything you wanted? Okay. Well, oh, Sister Carol.
With my vast experience in this, I would have the conversation before I ever got married. For those who are single, I think it's really important to have those things on the table right away.
That's why you are who you are. Just jump in. Thank you. What a perfect way to close, right? With words of wisdom from Sister Carol. Thank you. Ladies, I want to give our panelists a huge round of applause. They have put in a lot of time. Thank you. And keep clapping for yourselves, because coming here tonight was a really big step. You all earned it.